Welcome into the midweek mailbag show presented to you by Fantasy Points. My name is Nick Skrip, and I will be your host for this segment every week through the 2022 fantasy season, where I take questions from you guys and answer them through this stream covering different topics. Questions come from either Twitter on the Fantasy Points Media Group page or from our Fantasy Points Discord. If you are seeing the show and you want your question featured, I ask them every Monday on the Fantasy Points page on Twitter or within the Discord. So you can shoot those questions to me every Monday through one of those two spots. So we are going to kick things off with at FF Shane B from Twitter, who asks, are you confident starting Mooney this week, assuming they aren't playing in a monsoon again? Which is important to note because I'm a Chicago fan who enjoyed that game, but it was very interesting to see Soldier Field underwater and guys slipping and sliding through again that monsoon. Justin Fields only had 17 total attempts during this game that the Bears managed to get that W in, and I think it did have an impact on some of the pass catchers. For instance, Darnell Mooney, he had one catch for 8 yards on 3 targets. He still played in 90% of the snaps, which I think is important to note. But again, when your quarterback's not throwing the ball a ton and the weather conditions are like that, it does have an impact on what you do. And Darnell Mooney obviously had a pretty poor week in this offense for fantasy points. But I think it's important to note that this is a guy who took a huge jump from his rookie to sophomore season, that sophomore season being last season, where he had plus 42 targets, plus 20 receptions, plus 424 receiving yards, plus 120 yards after the catch from year one to year two. He had 4 weeks above 120 receiving yards, where he was number 11 in targets and target share. I think Justin Fields actually looked pretty good in this game. He extended some plays with his legs and had a few touchdowns within that game. So, although Darnell Mooney didn't have the week we wanted for fantasy, I think the impacts of not throwing the ball a ton and the weather just in general was what held him back. So I'm not super concerned with Mooney. I think he's a guy that you should be comfortable placing into your lineups on a weekly basis, just knowing that he is the wide receiver one for the Chicago Bears. I think the target share is going to be there. I think that as the season progresses on and Justin Fields develops as a passer, that Darnell Mooney is going to have some better weeks. So I wouldn't overreact. We've seen the upside of Darnell Mooney with the receiving yards, and a guy who's going to be the featured wide receiver will continue to get some work, and it's a product of that actual game. So expect Darnell Mooney to have a good target share in this offense. Guys like Dante Pettis and Equanimous St. Brown, and eventually Velus Jones Jr., and maybe N'Keal Harry, when he's healthy, will have an impact. But I think we're looking at one guy who is the guy, whereas those guys are just going to be role players in the offense. So don't be too concerned about playing Darnell Mooney moving forward. I think seeing Justin Fields have a pretty decent day was a good sign moving forward in this offense. At John McGlynn 75 on Twitter asks, how fast are you selling Carson Wentz in a one quarterback league right now? And what are you asking for him? So Carson Wentz had a good week, a really good week. 27 for 41, 313 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He had 29.72 fantasy points, which meant he was the QB3 of the week. So I don't think many of us thought Wentz was going to be a top 10 quarterback going into the week, let alone a top 3 option. We do want to note that it was against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who gave up the 5th most points in 2021. So maybe they changed some things with their defense and added some pieces. I know the draft helped them with that, but it is important to know it was the Jaguars. So I'm going to approach this from a redraft perspective, one quarterback league where you might have Carson Wentz. He's probably your second QB, maybe your QB on the bench right now. So if you were looking to sell Wentz, I think you have 2 options. Sell for a usable piece for your team now, banking on that week, or let him play against Detroit, who gave up 243 passing yards through the air from Jalen Hurts. So I think he's set up to have another good week. So that might mean an even higher potential sell ceiling for Carson Wentz if somebody needs him. So there's guys you can gamble on if you wanted to sell him straight up in redraft. Maybe Kadarius Toney if you think that his usage will change from what it was in week 1. Ramondre Stevenson is a guy that I think you can add for the running back position, if you wanted some depth, he didn't do too much, probably doesn't cost a lot. Maybe Dawson Knox is a guy you said, hey, he had a bad week, but I think he's going to have some touchdowns in this Bills offense that we've seen him do in the past. So there's some guys, I guess it really just depends on what you are looking for. I don't think you're going to get like an A.J. Brown straight up for Carson Wentz, but the big piece of trading advice here is to scan your league for somebody who might need Carson Wentz. Maybe it is the guy that just lost Dak Prescott. Maybe it is a guy that is going to continue to look for a streaming quarterback but wants a solidified option. So scan your league for one, identify who could be a trade target, and then see, hey, this guy has these couple pieces that can really be a boost for my team instead of Carson Wentz. Maybe you have a Jalen Hurts or a Lamar Jackson and Carson Wentz is just chilling on your bench. So I wouldn't just throw him on the trade block and expect gold to come your way. But I think if you are active scanning your league and saying, hey, I want to capitalize on this good performance, then there's some guys you can identify as pieces that will improve your team for the long run. You always want to make your team better when it comes to trading. That's the number one goal of trading. So maybe Wentz is a guy you're thinking to yourself also, hey, maybe I should just hold him because I just saw what happened to Dak Prescott. I don't want to be in no man's land for the quarterback position. But again, big week. It was against the Jaguars. Maybe he's going to have a nice season. Maybe he's going to have another good week versus Detroit, regress from there. But just some things to think about when it comes to Carson Wentz, who had a great week. So we had two similar questions at Cruiser128 and at Hey Mr. Holman. So at Cruiser128, these are from Twitter again. Which of the week one duds are you most concerned about? And then at Hey Mr. Holman asks a similar question. Any players you have major concerns with going forward after week one? So I have some guys I have some concerns with, starting off with CeeDee Lamb, who had 4.9 fantasy points. The good part was that he had 11 targets. That's not bad, right? It's pretty good. It's what we want out of CeeDee Lamb or any pass catcher. The bad part was 2 receptions. So 2 receptions on 11 targets, not great. Dallas didn't look too good through the air. And now we have Dak Prescott, who is injured and will be out likely 6 to 8 weeks, which leaves Cooper Rush as the starting quarterback. He is going to have his second career start as a quarterback in this coming week, pending he is the starting quarterback, which he's slated out to be. So I'm not sure if Dallas goes and makes a move for a quarterback. Everybody wants to throw Jimmy G's name in the hat for all of these sort of things. But pending it's Cooper Rush, I'm a bit concerned with CeeDee Lamb because he might have some good targets, but with a quarterback that doesn't have a ton of experience, that we don't see a ton of upside in, are those targets going to result in something big time for CeeDee Lamb? I'm a bit concerned. I'm not going to say, obviously, don't drop him, don't sell him for dirt cheap, but it might come to the point where we have to see how things look in this Dallas offense and see how he operates with Cooper Rush. So maybe a little patience with CeeDee Lamb, but definitely took a hit this week, and I'm a bit concerned. Another guy, Devonta Smith, he had a goose egg, 0 points. He had 0 catches on 4 targets. This is a team that we think is going to try to establish the passing game a bit more, but they ran the ball. They ran the ball more than they passed the ball this past week in week one. A.J. Brown, on the other hand, though, had 13 targets. He established himself as the alpha that they went out and grabbed, and they gave him the bag this offseason. So Jalen Hurts had a good connection with A.J. Brown, who was a big part of this playbook. He hyper targeted him, but everybody else is a little sketchy in the passing game. And Dallas Goedert's going to be involved. Of course, they're going to run the ball with both Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders. I'm a bit nervous that Devonta Smith's targets are going to fluctuate more than we'd like it to on a week-to-week basis. Cam Akers, concern there, 0 points. He had only 3 touches in this game to Darrell Henderson's 18. Is he easing into the role? Is he getting back healthy? Not super sure, but Cam Akers is a guy I'm very, very uncomfortable putting into my lineup in week 2. Just seeing the 3 total touches. I probably would leave him on my bench right now and not play him, just seeing the difference in usage between him and Darrell Henderson. Aaron Rodgers, 3.7 fantasy points. A.J. Dillon at 6, Aaron Jones 5, Romeo Doubs 5, Robert Tonyan 5, Christian Watson 4, Sammy Watkins 3, Randall Cobb 3. So you had a bunch of guys getting like okay targets in this offense. No Allen Lazard for this one. I'm a little concerned with Aaron Rodgers, just seeing that I feel like this team is going to really overemphasize the usage of their running backs. Maybe it's in the passing game and on the ground, but still, like, no one really stepped up as that clear, hey, Devontae Adams is gone, no Allen Lazard. Who's going to be the guy for Aaron Rodgers? Damian Pierce is the last guy. Probably just going to be a guy you need to have some patience with, but 4.9 fantasy points. He was second in touches in that backfield to Rex Burkhead. Do the coaches trust him right now enough to give him a full workload? I don't think that's the case. Can he earn that workload? Sure. But right now, going into week 2, am I comfortable just throwing him in to my lineup and hoping that he surpasses Rex Burkhead after a week that he was behind Rex Burkhead? I'm a little iffy when it comes to that. Next question at jmarksd, a spot. He says, I was just offered Antonio Gibson and Miles Sanders for Saquon Barkley. Elijah Mitchell was my RB2, and I don't have much more after that. Do I accept? So let's look at these 3 specific players. So we're talking Gibson and Sanders for Saquon Barkley. So Gibson, 20 fantasy points. He was guided by 7 receptions for 72 receiving yards. Solid. Miles Sanders, 13 carries for 96 rushing yards and a touchdown, 18.5 fantasy points. Solid. Saquon Barkley, 18 carries for 164 rushing yards, a touchdown, 6 receptions for 30 receiving yards, 33.4 fantasy points. That is great. We just saw Saquon Barkley back when he was in his RB1 rookie season, looking like he's going to be a huge comeback player this season. So my opinion with this, you downgraded your overall running back strength already with losing Mitchell to injury. Don't downgrade further by losing your piece. I said this earlier and I'll say it again. You need to identify someone who has a surplus of what you need. So I'd be looking to see who I can make a trade with in my league if I want to have some more running back depth to somebody that has plenty of running back depth. I don't want to just continue to downgrade my running back room just to have more of a spread out lineup, if that makes sense. So I want to make my team better. I'm going to target certain guys. I think in redraft, you can target guys like Kareem Hunt and Chase Edmonds, Brees Hall, David Montgomery. Kareem Hunt had a great week, but the rest of those guys were just okay. But none of those guys should cost you, Jamar Chase or anything like that. So I'd say hold on to Saquon Barkley. Don't continue to downgrade your running back position and just identify somebody who's got plenty of depth and figure out what they need to make this deal happen. You can also hit the waivers. I know this week, guys like Jeff Wilson Jr., Darrell Henderson might have been out there. There's going to be more guys that might be available in your league that might have enough touches to just hold you over right now. We mentioned Rex Burkhead, not a super sexy pick, but if that holds you over, that's probably better than continuing to downgrade your players. So target those guys that I mentioned and maybe some waiver wire guys for replacements versus downgrading further. The next question at Anthony Fantasy 2, Miko Hardman saw 6 targets and had 56% of the snap share in week 1. Could he potentially be a weekly flex play this year? Interesting question on a good offense with the Chiefs. So 56% of the snaps, nothing wild there. 3 receptions on 6 targets for 16 receiving yards. Not that great there either. He was guided by this scoring of 10.6 by a touchdown. So nothing really stuck out. The touchdown is what gave him a boost. Nothing really to rave about there. He's third in targets behind Travis Kelce, who had 9, and Juju Smith-Schuster, who had 8. I think Sky Moore continues to grow in this offense, learn the playbook, and get established with Patrick Mahomes. So I think he is going to add more to this offense as time goes. We know that rookies take some time to develop as fantasy options. MVS within this team too, he'll get a few targets here and there sporadically as well. So to me, Miko Hardman's role, I feel like, is just going to be too inconsistent to say, hey, flex him every week. He had 11 weeks under 10 fantasy points the last season. I mean, he's had a few boom games here and there, but unless there's someone injured, which, knock on wood, we hope nobody gets injured, but unless the snap percentage goes up as well, I'm not super convinced that I'm comfortable flexing him versus other guys that I feel like will have a more established role in their offense. Last question here. This is from Discord. Helen Eckler asks, PPR, which running back is a which running back start is more concerning rest of season, Najee or Kamara? So both running backs did not have a good week. Kamara, 9 carries for 39 rushing yards, 3 catches for 7 yards, 7.6 fantasy points, 62% of the snaps. He's dealing with some sort of rib injury, but I don't think it's going to be significant. Najee, on the other hand, he had 10 carries for 23 rushing yards, 2 catches for 3 yards, and a touchdown through the air, 10.6 fantasy points. 59% of the snaps played because he left with a foot injury. He's been dealing with a Lisfranc sprain to the same foot during training camp, so that same foot's banged up again. He came out and said, "I'm playing this weekend." So I'm not sure if we completely believe Naji Harris is going to be on the field or not. But looking at these guys prior to the season starting, I had Najee as my running back 5. I had Alvin Kamara as my running back 8. So I leaned on Najee if it was a perfectly healthy world going into the season. I don't know enough either when it comes to these sort of injuries to say, hey, this thing is going to keep popping up, or this injury is going to just linger throughout the season and be something that holds Najee back when we're talking about him specifically in this foot deal. I would suggest to you guys to follow Edwin Porras, who is our injury specialist here at Fantasy Points, and see what he has to say about Najee Harris's injury with that foot. I'm not going to ever pretend that I, am a medical doctor or an athletic trainer or a sports physician or anything like that. We just take in the information as analysts and kind of, develop our strategies and advice based off of that. But make sure you look at a guy like Edwin's content who specializes in this to really dig into what sort of injury we're looking at when it comes to this season long outlook of Najee Harris. So in general, for both of these guys, both had bad weeks. Both are guys that we've seen in the past, this past season, have really, really good weeks through the air as pass catching running backs. I wouldn't overreact and sell guys for dirt cheap. I wouldn't just put them on my bench unless there's some sort of a pending injury that we hear things of snap counts and testing things out in the warm-ups and stuff like that. But don't overreact to these two guys because we know the upside that's there with them. Again, follow Edwin Porras from Fantasy Points to see what we're looking at with Najee. But I guess the generalization of this is that we don't want to overreact too much without having a good set of information and a good source to actually dig into these two running backs and where we're projecting them forward here. But that'll do it here for today's show. If you have a question, shoot those over through Twitter on the Fantasy Points Media Group page or through the Discord if you are a subscriber, which you should be if you are not already. Hope you guys enjoyed the show and got something out of it. Good luck in week 2.